There we go. Okay, and I'm going to try to share my PowerPoint that I tried to whip up here. Okay, so we got this scheduled for about an hour. It'll likely go a little bit over, but we're gonna go no longer than about 2:55 because a bunch of us will then be in another Zoom meeting. But this is a part of a longer series that we first started back in 2012. Oh, sorry, by the way, my name is Tai Tengon, chair of the Department of Ethnic Studies. And together with Ula Hassiger, both from Ethnic Studies and Access, Julie Walsh from Center for Pacific Island Studies, and a number of really critical student helpers, especially Ruben Campos, Kat Lobendon, and a number of others. We've put this together as an event that received funding from SEED. It's something that really came about when we first were working with Jojo and others in the community to raise awareness of some important issues around racism and discrimination, particularly as it targeted our local Micronesian community. And then that initial Micronesian Connections Forum became a broader Oceanic Connections Forum, which we had, I think, 4 different events. We had 3 separate symposium and a panel at a conference before we sort of went on pause. And of course, in that time, lost Jojo, who I'll also talk a little bit more about in a second. But that's sort of where all of this came from, and how we came to be. The sponsors, again, are Ethnic Studies, Access, SEED, and CPIS. So mahalo for all the support from these organizations. Just some ground rules, and I put this in the chat box. Please mute yourself and silence your phones throughout the event. Towards the end, we'll if we have enough time, we'll welcome some discussion, but we'll be selecting some of the questions, and unfortunately, we apologize, we're not going to be able to get all of them addressed, but we'll try to get some representative ones. And again, we also ask that comments and anything else that you put up is offered in that spirit of respect and engagement that Jojo exemplified in his life. And if you don't feel you can do that, then maybe you can join another meeting. But that's we want to make this a safe space honoring his labor and his life. I didn't have this on the PowerPoint, but did also want to recognize today is the Missing and Murdered Women's and Girls Day, and wanted to also take a second to remember and to keep in mind those missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Okay, with that said, that out of the way, Jojo, he's the person that we wanted to honor and to commemorate, Dr. Joakim Peter, also known as Jojo, who there was a very nice biography that was written about him that is on the email that we sent out with the link to this scholarship, which I would like to direct you towards. This particular scholarship to develop the next generation of COFA leaders in his name, done by the Micronesian United Big Island organization. So if you're moved, please do help support in those material ways, that legacy that Jojo has left. What we're doing today is a tribute in many ways, and rather than me kind of sharing the biography of him, I'm gonna invite our speakers to share reminiscence about him and some of their own kind of memories and inspirations, as we also take on those larger issues of climate change and the current situation with COVID-19. And thinking through the ways in which he offered a very grounded perspective on how to draw on our own traditions, our own oceanic connections, our own lived experiences, and our community strengths in order to adapt to these changing climates. So this is the website. I guess I embedded a link in here, which I don't think I meant to do, but let's see. This is the website that you'll want to go to in order to donate. Okay, now how do I get out of here? Okay, I keep on getting out. Okay, there we go. So I just wanted to start by offering one of my own reminiscences of Jojo. In an article that Paul Lyons and I did for the American Quarterly, we interviewed Jojo, and the conversation was wide-ranging. It hit on a number of issues, but towards the very end of the interview, Paul Lyons, who's also passed on too early, professor in English, offered the question of thinking through the power of art and performance, and in part referencing one of our speakers today, Kathy, but more generally, what it is to think about voice in sharing the messages that are so important for the community. And I wanted to, let's see if I can work this. In part, this is my testing of my Zoom abilities. I wanted to play a little clip from one of the interviews that Jojo had, or from that interview that Jojo had with us. So I'm going to very quickly shift my screen sharing to bring up my browser. Okay, that's all right. Share screen. Do you want to share? Okay, continue. Okay. And we've set up a Laulima site that's got a number of different resources there, including the video that was taken when Paul and I interviewed Jojo. And this was back in October 2014. Even though it's a while, a lot of his words still kind of speak to us in important ways. And I'll just play a little clip just in order for us to kind of hear his voice. And let's hope that this works.
In terms of communities in Hawaii and elsewhere, understanding something more about Micronesian issues, it seems that spoken word poetry and the arts have been able to do a lot that academic studies haven't. I think of
Should nobody read our papers?
Jetnil in front of the UN, recently. What do you think about that form?
I don't think that form is unique to Micronesia and the islanders. I think for example, yes, it is a form of expression that islanders have mastered. But if you also look at the young, hip hop, yeah, it's a far more powerful tool in some realm than academic papers, and that realm is much larger has a larger audience than the one for academics. Yeah, people understand the power of spoken word and understand the emotions, the powerful emotions in oral performances. I've tried reading poems. I don't get as much as reading it than to actually hear it. Yeah, and hear somebody, because I'm listening to a voice. And it's hard to imagine emotions, maybe just because of my training from written text without the performance, and some.
Right. So that was Jojo offering those important words about thinking with the power of performance and words, and even referencing hip hop. And in the spirit of that particular section of our talk story, I wanted to also invite Punahele to offer a performance in lieu of a prayer or a chant or something else. I thought this might be a little bit more appropriate. So Punahele, one of our majors in ethnic studies who's helped us organize this, is, okay, I'm gonna pull up the bios. Kanaka Maoli hip hop artist, educator, born and raised in the slums of Makaha on Oahu's west side. He teaches youth from disadvantaged backgrounds the power of storytelling through hip hop. He's the first ever Bacardi Iron MC champion and the 2019 Nahoku Hano Hano Hip Hop Album of the Year award winner for his debut album From Beneath Mount Ka'ala, which chronicles the realities that many Hawaiians face living along the Waianae coast. Music has taken him around the world, sharing stories of resistance and resurgence that add to the collective struggle of all oppressed people. And I've asked him to at least perform a small part of I think the first track of his latest album. And I'll let Punahele take it away from here. So Punahele, can you come on?
Yeah, aloha everyone. I'm excited. I kind of filmed something earlier in case this song is about navigation, and I kind of navigator or a part of academia, but someone who before coming to college got his degree at the chicken fight to speak from the perspective of the streets and to honor Papa Mao as someone who taught my people, who retaught my people how to navigate, and also to build more solidarity with our Micronesian and Marshallese, Chuukese brothers and sisters. And just because when I teach kids inside of the DH, you look who's right next to each other. It's Hawaiians, Chuukese, Marshallese people. And it's like, sometimes in the streets, it gets hectic amongst us. But as Apeli Aofa taught me when I went to college, the ocean is the highway that connects us and doesn't separate us. And I see forms of hip hop artists, Hawaiians, Micronesians linking and uniting already. And I'm just excited for the future. So right here, let's go. Here it is. Yeah. Shine like the sun and flow like the stream. We rise like the tides in the sea. Other realms of that if you believe. The heart can't feel what the eyes can't see. Shine like the sun and flow like the stream. We rise the tides and the sea. Of the realms of the if you believe. The heart can feel what the eyes can't see. We relearn navigation from our Micronesian cousins. We knew our vessels from the mast to the rudder. With the stars in the night, we navigate the maze. The water that we drank was provided by the rain. Livicated to Eddie I Cow, bringing poetries down. Iku Mau Mau. Cut across the water and our movements are swift. When crab claws grab a hold of the wind, shine like the sun and flow like the stream. We rise like the tides in the sea. Of the realms of the if you believe. The heart can feel what the eyes can't see. Shine like the sun and flow like the stream. We rise like the tides in the sea. Of the realms of the if you believe. The heart can feel what the eyes can't see. And there it is.
Awesome. Mahalo Punahele.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the importance of thinking through those connections and the ways in which the canoe, the va'a, is what has connected us in so many important ways, which was also part of what we were trying to establish with having a va'a program that came out of some of our forums, Kahola Va'a, that was meant to connect our Hawaiian and our Marshallese ohana, as well as, our broader Micronesian ohana, Marshallese, those from the Federated States of Micronesia, Palau, and indeed all peoples of Oceania. So thank you so much for that. And I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint and get to our speakers. I did want to also note that Punahele will be involved in tomorrow's Aloha Āina collective hip hop workshop, which is going to, I believe, try to develop some new material speaking to the themes that we're talking about today. So if you are interested, please connect there. I think the link is also on the email that came out, and if you don't have it, you can connect with Ruben. Again, if we've been taking any glances at the news, I think we're all now aware that Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders are unfortunately leading the rates of infection, particularly in places like California, Washington, I think Utah, Colorado as well, and Hawaii. Which really raises a number of issues and challenges, but challenges and issues like these are nothing new to us, and in many ways are also intimately tied to climate change, both in how this particular pandemic originated, but also in the ways that we can offer Indigenous Native Pacific responses. I want to thank Kathy for tweeting this, because I would not have seen it otherwise, from the Republic of Marshall Islands, Minister Nemra's really important statement that linked climate change and the COVID-19 situation, and the ways in which we can draw upon our own traditions to adapt to these changes. We have this also in our Laulima resources that you can kind of take a look at if you want to go there. But let's get to our speakers. Unfortunately, Sha Ongelungel is not able to join us today. So I pre-recorded a discussion with her, and I'm going to see if it works with me playing the video. I'm going to hope it does. I'm not the best with Zoom, as you're seeing. But we do have Josie Howard and Kathy Jetnil-Kijiner. Josie is a native of Onon Island in the Federated States of Micronesia, with a MSW from the School of Social Work here from UH Manoa, also program director for We Are Oceania. Graduated from Xavier High School, attended the College of Micronesia, and in 1989 transferred to University of Hawaii Hilo, studying biology, anthropology, Pacific Island studies, and making her one of the first Micronesians migrating under the Compact of Free Association Treaty. At UH Hilo, she was a researcher at the Minority Biomedical Research Program and president of the Chuukese Student Association and International Student Association, among many other ways of serving the community, which she has continued to do ever since, working with the Hawaii State Department of Education, founding the Young Voyagers, a youth club in media in Olelo, co-founding the Micronesian Cultural Awareness Project, and We Are Oceania, to name a few of her many accomplishments. Kathy is a poet of Marshall Islander ancestry who currently serves as climate envoy for the Ministry of Environment for the Republic of Marshall Islands government, as well as director for the youth environmentalist nonprofit Jojo. She was born in the Marshall Islands, raised in Hawaii, and is currently based in the island of Majuro in the Marshall Islands. Her primary creative practice explores her culture's rich storytelling and how they intersect and dialogue with evolving issues threatening our islands and community. Her focus has been climate change and the legacy of nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands. She shares these explorations through the mediums of poetry, performance, and media. This practice is also informed by the community organizing from her nonprofit, as well as her international advocacy. And again, assuming that my video skills are gonna work okay and not completely fail. When we hear from Sha, she is a Palauan American QTPI millennial and professional rabble-rouser. She spent the better part of the last 2 decades working in digital media, experimenting with different applications of social media, and her special brand of productive pettiness as a positive force in the community. She's best known for her podcast, the Shenanigans podcast, her hashtag being Micronesian, and its associated Twitter thread, and her never-ending quest for the best nachos on Oahu. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed guests. And these are the prompts I asked them to think about beforehand, and maybe we could kind of go through each one and having each respond. Let's start off with the memories about an inspiration from Jojo, and particularly around his importance for our work for social justice. And if we could invite Josie to offer the first words, please.
Okay, hi everyone. I want to first of all thank Ula and thank Kai for this opportunity and all of those that had put this together. And thank you, Jojo, for again another surprise. And that can lead me right into the first question, sharing memories of him. Jojo was my role model. Growing up on a small island, very isolated island, never seen Jojo, but his name was all over Chuuk State. It even came to my island, which is a very, island far away out in the middle of the ocean. So I've heard of him even before I met him, and I've heard of how smart he is. So I had this idea of him in my head as a role model. And I didn't actually meet him until I came to Hawaii. So our first meeting was here in Hawaii. And that was, I think, 1994. But one thing that I remember Jojo the most about was we were both invited to speak to the Catholic Chuukese youth. And his speech, or the topic of his speech, was this Mordlagis word. I say Mordlagis word because we're both Chuukese, but we speak different languages. I come from one end of Chuuk and he comes from the other end, and we don't speak the same language and never heard this word before. And so I had to really listen carefully to his definition, and that's the word sasaral. Sasaral. So he told the kids to be sasaral. And sasaral means to be assertive, to, because usually we Micronesians are very shy people, and especially the youths. So his word to them was, don't be shy. Go out there and get it, and be assertive. So in the work that he's been doing here in Hawaii, the work that he and I have, partnering doing. I've seen Jojo being a sasaraw. Everything he does is sasaraw, and I feel like this event today, like many other times, part of his sasaraw would be putting me in the middle of something that I don't even know or have a clue about. But anyways, we make it work. And then the second thing was at the second Micronesian Youth Summit, his word was connectivity. And that's part of our title today. And to me, that is so important because he's speaking about the importance of relationship. And to do our work for social justice, we have to bring in all the people that are connected by this, And I think that's one thing that we indigenous people have and are connected with. And so the last thing that I'm gonna attempt to do, and I feel like at first I was like, no, I'm not gonna do it. But then, I don't know, Ty, you just made it like, I think it's his thing again. Now he's like, I feel like I'm being dared to do something that I don't normally do. He loves Chugi's love song. And in the middle of the night, I'll be up working, and then all of a sudden I see this post. It's a Chugi's love song by, my brother Jojo. And then I'll be like, there he goes again. Either he's working hard or stressed out. But this song, I want to sing just one verse. It kind of like, bring together the work sasaraw and connectivity and amplify the meaning of Jojo's work and how destructive it can be that we see in the pandemic and we see with climate change. And so it's a Chugi's song. So it goes like this. Okay. Ei wufi tuk seri tu. Ei wuta seri wanari disi. Ei wuri ngasaga se kukuetenan terupuitin formuwe. So Chugi's men are known for their charms. We call it charame. They're very good with wording, with seducing women. But the meaning of the song says, remove or disconnect the flesh from the bones, disconnect the blood from the veins, and disconnect my heart from my body, and put it into the boiling water of your fongum. It's kind of like my love for you or something like that. I mean, that's very destructive, and that's very... the way I see it is that the song, if you remove all those, then there's no life. You move the flesh from the bones; they need to be connected in order for the bones to be moving. You move the blood from the veins; there's no more life. You move the heart. So I just want to kind of like use that as to warm me up and to set the tone for me today. Thank you, and to honor my brother.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Mahalo nui. Could we bring in Kathy now to share a little?
I don't know how great the connection is, but I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm calling in from the Marshalls, from actually our Jojo Youth Center. So I actually didn't get to know Jojo as well as I would have liked. I always kind of liked Josie. I looked up to him a lot, and I knew him as like this important figure in our community. He also knew my dad. He went to Xavier High School with my dad. And so it was, initially when I first met him, he immediately told me about how he knew my dad, and I felt comfortable with him right away. When I first came out with my first poem, I think it was like the second poem, No, it was my third one. The letters. It was the Micronesian poem, basically. I worked with the fourth branch to put together this piece about the racism that Micronesians felt, and it was a very scary piece to put out there initially. And now that I look back, I'm like, why did I even do that? It was a very controversial topic to put out there and to put my face to, and yet, I did it. And I think partially the reason why I was able to do it was because I had the support of the fourth branch, but I also had the support of Jojo. So I actually sent it to him and asked for his feedback, and was just basically like, is this okay? What do you think? Like, he knew the community better. Even though I grew up in it, I felt like he was one of the role models that I wanted approval from, to make sure I wasn't doing anything that would kind of hurt us as a community. And he immediately was really supportive of it, welcomed it with open wide arms, and was just, stood by me when that piece came out, and has always been supportive of me, as and it felt very like uncle status. Like, I looked up to him very much like an uncle. And when I heard of his loss, it really, it was really shocking, and I think it's really saddening for me as well as for everybody who knew him. And so that's my short contribution. But I just really appreciate that we're giving this space to him and his work, and to his tireless efforts to support our community out there. It means a lot, and I love that his legacy continues to today.
Mahalo, Kathy. Thank you so much. Now, your uncle comment actually is something that was echoed by Sha. I know Sha's kind of on and off right now, kind of between clients. Let's see, are you on right now, Sha? Maybe not at the second. I'm going to go ahead and play her video that we did, and hope that this works out okay. So bear with me as I try to make this one happen. Social justice.
Jojo is an iconic figure. I mean, I grew up in Portland, Oregon. I spent my first 18 years of life there. Then I came here. I lived in Washington. I traveled around the Pacific for work. But all that time, I knew the name Jojo. Before I'd ever met him, it was just, oh, Jojo, he does this and this and this. And when I finally met him a couple of years ago for the first time, it was just kind of like meeting a celebrity. And it was awkward because he was like a celebrity, but at the same time, he has that very uncle-like presence. And when you fangirl over an uncle, it's awkward. And so there was a community meeting, and I showed up, and I was like, do you know who you are? And then like 2 seconds later, wow, did I really just say that? How embarrassing. But I mean, he's such a good sport about it. And he didn't realize that I had kind of grown up in Micronesian activism. And so it came as a surprise to him when I did speak with him. It was our first engagement together at the biennial, that I launched straight into like the Solomon Report and just the history of the early formation of Micronesian Western politics. And so it was very kind of a pivotal moment to know that I did something or said something or kind of surprised someone who's so major in like the activist world that I've kind of been around for a lot of my life.
Yeah, so that was our contribution from Sha. I'm trying to, it's great seeing you, Kathy, but for some reason the screen won't leave you. You have that presence. I'll just switch it to like this. Let me go back to the next question here for us, which is up on the PowerPoint. So if you could share directly in relation to the situation that we're dealing with now, the conditions for COFA communities under both the pandemic and climate change, and how they highlight challenges too, as well as opportunities for social justice. And maybe Kathy, why don't you start us off here?
Okay, so I'm obviously not as well versed in what's happening in Hawaii because I'm not living there right now, and I'm not really doing that kind of work on it. But I do know that the Armine Consulate has been working really hard to try to make sure that the Marshallese community is receiving awareness, as well as free masks and distributing free masks, and making sure that they've been reaching out to the community and supporting them in applying for even things like I think those checks for disability, for not disability, but what do you call it, for job loss. And as far as opportunities for social justice, I also have heard recently about the comments that were made by the Department of Health, where they basically talked about the communities that were affected by COVID, and in particular, they pinpointed the employees from the McDonald's, and they actually named Marshallese people, as one of the communities that's been spreading the virus. And I think he didn't necessarily say it super directly, but he did bring it up, and it became an issue for Marshallese community, who is already, our Marshallese community is already marginalized, and we're already, experiencing tension from the kind of the racial tension from being Micronesian in Hawaii. But then when the Department of Health came out with that statement, that made it even worse for us, because then it put pressure on Marshallese members to not come forward and say they're sick or try to get help because of the fear that they're going to be discriminated against even further. And that's not to mention that many of the Marshallese who are getting sick are also coming from Eniwela. They're coming from the island that had experienced nuclear testing. And so they're coming from this legacy of displacement, and then coming out there and then having to deal with the social structures of class that's holding a lot of people back and making it hard for them to apply for even health insurance. And so we also have macadamia nut and coffee pickers who are in that community who are getting affected and who do not have access to health insurance. And so they're not getting the basic needs for COVID. And so what I really want to commend is the Big Island Marshallese community, the Big Island Marshallese Community Association, because I think they were the ones who came out with a really strong statement on the Marshall Islands Constitution Day, which is very fitting. They used the Marshall Islands Constitution Day to put out this statement condemning what the Department of Health had said and making sure that our voices were heard. So rather than letting this kind of shame fester in our community, the fact that they came out with this really strong position, I think that's really inspiring. And I've only just recently learned about it, like literally just a few hours ago. But either way, I think that's a really strong kind of a way in which we've made that we've used that as a platform to discuss these social justice issues that we're already experiencing as a community. And then there's also the international level, of course, when we're talking about climate change. I think for me, in my particular role as climate envoy, when the COVID started hitting and we started seeing all these flights getting canceled and all these climate conferences that our governments rely on to discuss and push along climate action, we were wondering, well, what does this mean? I mean, how does COVID sort of fit into the climate space, and how do we, how is this linked? There's a link there, but we couldn't really articulate it at the time. And after a while, we're seeing all these people saying, look, the air is cleaner. We are the virus. Look, it's getting better. And that's where I really kind of felt uncomfortable immediately, because that, the cleaner air, the less emissions, that's coming at the cost of the lives of those with disabilities, those who are poorest, those who are, communities of color. And that is not climate justice. That's not climate action. what we have been advocating for as a government and as, you know, as social justice activists and those on climate change movement is for a transition that honors our every single community member and that takes into account the most vulnerable in our community. And so that's kind of a real link that I see between COVID and climate, is that those who are the most vulnerable are getting hit the worst. And that's going to happen on a larger scale with climate change. And we're also seeing, of course, that pandemics are going to get worse because of climate change. You know, this COVID originated out of, you know, habitats being destroyed and wildlife, you know, the destruction of wildlife and habitats and illegal marketing, you know, of wildlife. And so I think that, you know, we in the Marshall Islands closed our borders way early on to COVID because of dengue as an outbreak. Dengue is, again, also linked to climate change. You know, the mosquito-borne illnesses will continue to get worse. And so we're going to see worse effects of climate, of these kinds of things happening on a larger scale with climate change. So that's what we're trying to keep people remembering, is that climate change impacts are still continuing despite COVID. COVID has not stopped any of that. And we've seen that with the Tonga and also in, I think it was Vanuatu, they got hit by huge storms and then they couldn't get the climate, the COVID reliefs they needed because of the storm surges that hit them. So anyways, I think I sort of went on long enough, but those are the links that I've been sort of trying to understand, and also just hearing the really important work that our Marshallese community members are doing. I just want to highlight them as well, the consulate as well as the Big Island community out there. Thank you.
Mahalo, thank you so much. Josie, could we bring you in here to share in response to this question?
Okay, I'll just add to what Kathy had already mentioned. I think one thing that I see from my end is the coming together of our community. Under, you know, the COVID, our community is uniting to help each other, and that is so beautiful to see. I mean, we're not only connecting on you know, the Micronesian level, but we're also connecting with other Pacific Islanders across the continent to, you know, to share our stories and to figure out solutions. Climate change, in a way, both, they're very destructive. They change our way of life dramatically. But one thing that stood out to me about the pandemic that I observed it here in Hawaii is that it does not discriminate. And, you know, the first people that got them, they were like, you know, like movie actors, the people that travel a lot. And so I think for me and some of my friends were kind of like talking about how this was kind of ironic, you know, and the fact that everything got shut down. To me, it was like a time for us to stop and to really observe what was going on and to realize how important our resources was, our lands, our ocean, you know, and this is how I saw it connecting to climate change. You know, people have been fighting and fighting and fighting for climate change, and the pandemic just came in and kind of like, boom, shine the light on how we can make a decision that can quickly turn things around. And, you know, as indigenous people, we don't have the power, and all the times we get affected by people in power that make decisions that impacts our life greatly. I'll stop here.
Thanks, Josie. I'm going to play a little clip from the talk story I had with Sha in response to this now.
I think with the pandemic and just as much with climate change, we're such a small population within like this whole great group that we tend to get overlooked. This being May, it's Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And I did a whole podcast episode a couple of years ago about how like the AAPI umbrella is a very embracing umbrella. And I feel like the same thing happens under climate change, under pandemics, under anything that requires large systemic change, because there's smaller islands that people don't think of unless you're scuba diving or you watched Survivor maybe. And so that's a challenge in and of itself. And then with the struggles we have, especially here with the different islanders not necessarily connecting, networking, working together collectively, that makes it even a bigger struggle. There's power in numbers, and we have numbers, but the numbers are kind of broken up in their own little sections. And so that's always a challenge. And I think I was reading it in Civil Beat how the pandemic is affecting Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders at higher numbers, but it's also hard to see that data. And the same thing goes with climate change. I mean, we've contributed so little to this problem, and yet it's affecting us so deeply, whether it's because of how we live culturally, because of how just the system is set up. And so a lot of it boils down to us having to work together. And it's kind of like when people insult your family. Like, I can make fun of my cousins all I want, but the minute someone outside of my family makes fun of them, then we'll all put that aside and go and fight that fight. If we collectively could do that better, we could get more done. Like on the pandemic front, on the climate change front, just kind of in general.
Hey. So that was some of the mana'o that Sha shared with us too on that one. I'll turn to the last one, and we'll quickly try to address these before opening up for some discussion. Again, oops, everything's moving on my end here, sorry. I'm losing control of my my computer screen here. But here we go. Sorry. The final question being, coming from these experiences, these on-the-ground experiences, what are some community-based solutions to these challenges that draw upon our oceanic connections to the environment and to each other? Josie, could you start us off here with some thoughts and your experiences?
Okay, mine might be really off, but I'll just say it this way. I think the pandemic brings light to two things for me. One is the comfort, or our comfort and sustaining way we live in today. Two, our Mother Earth and the land and ocean that has sustained us and maintained and sustained us for generations and generations. So maintaining the indigenous knowledge. So this is my recommendation, my suggestion. Maintaining indigenous knowledge and skills to survive a pandemic like this, like fishing, farming. I think like we have to really value those things. And how do we value them? And how do we? Because I feel like. We all know it's not valued in the classroom. So I say that we should honor our elders, and most importantly, because of our indigenous practice, they are the holders of those, if we still have any left. Make it requirement for our youth to learn their indigenous knowledge and skills in its own space, put value to it. And just like how we value Western education, there's a need to there's a need to handle it with honor, respect, its integrity to us as indigenous people. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my hope, that one day we can have a space for it.
Mahalo, thank you. Kathy?
This was a really tough question. I actually struggle with not knowing what to say right now. But I think one practice, I guess the one thing that comes to mind for me is I saw a lot of really callous statements being made by leaders in the U.S. about elders, and saying things like, well, letting them die, expecting grandparents to give up their lives, or just saying it's only going to affect the old, like the elders don't matter. And I think that in our cultures, we obviously uphold our elders very strongly, and where many of us grow up with them, many of us are connected to them, are taking care of them. We're not, shuttling them off on their own to be by themselves. And so I think that kind of connection, I think that's really important, that we maintain those kinds of connections. And so I guess that's one small thing that I would say, demonstrates, a way in which our culture and our community will continue to thrive, because we place an importance on relationships above, the status quo, or above capitalism, in a sense. And so I think that's kind of the best way that I can answer that question, because honestly, that's a really tough one. Thank you.
Great, no problem. Mahalo. I'm going to shift over now to Sha's response before we open this up, and I'll invite Julie Walsh to offer a comment and a question. For those who weren't following Sha and her work last year around the Being Micronesian hashtag, it really had to do with shedding light on the very racist sort of stuff that's out there in social media, and particularly in Twitter. And she took some screenshots of just language I'm not even going to repeat here. And she sort of started off there in terms of a response, and I'll make my sharing screen happen now.
Especially kind of when the media buzz happened around Being Micronesian, there was a lot of, I initially anticipated a lot of hate, because one of the things with the screenshots is I didn't redact any names. I left people's names intact so that people would know that these were the people saying it. And it wasn't about targeting like certain groups. It was to make a point that when someone does something wrong, like, you hold the individual accountable, not the whole. And from that came networking with different Native Hawaiian groups, Samoans, Tongans. It was weird. At one point, an article came out in The Guardian, and we were getting people like from throughout Europe who were saying things like, I don't know where Micronesia is. I've never heard of it, but this is horrible. What can I do to help? And so that helped create connections and allowed me to network in ways that I hadn't really considered before. And then last summer, with everything happening around Mauna Kea, it was an opportunity because Indigenous activism was happening worldwide. It was in Guam, CNMI, New Zealand, Puerto Rico, here. It was an opportunity for a lot of, especially us on Twitter, to kind of connect and look at the different ways that our problems were similar, and have, not allies, we were accomplices and advocates, and it became a whole like Pacifica Twitter family. But since that, these are the same people that I continue to be in touch with today. And when I see something going on, like, I'll message this person, like, I hear this is going on in like your country, what can we do to support you? It was a really interesting, I think the timing was interesting. It was kind of a worldwide Indigenous uprising facilitated by social media. And that was just, it was amazing, it was beautiful.
All right. So with that, I want to invite Julie Walsh from Center for Pacific Island Studies to offer some comment, question, and take it from here. So Julie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here together and being part of this community today, because what I'm hearing and what I think we're trying to do in respecting Jojo's work and his legacy is celebrating that sense of community, no matter where we are, whether we're Indigenous people of the Pacific, whether we're advocates, allies, supporters, friends. I think one of the important aspects of today's discussion has to do with action, social justice, you know, and sort of trying to ask, what are the ways that the rest of us who may be involved but less directly, but would like to be supportive, can help take action, because we are fully aware of the data around COVID-19, the peoples who are most vulnerable and impacted. And due to a lot of the work that each of you do, we're awareness around climate change, of course, and social issues in Hawaii are really heightened. And you know, many of us use your work in our courses, and we spread it, and we try and create another level of community and support. I think there's an interesting dynamic between celebrating the skills and the knowledge that help people sustain themselves in the islands, in their own communities, how to mitigate some of the climate change, and also mitigating some of the COVID-19 and sort of community support. And there's also that, you know, it's kind of hard to articulate, but there's a sense of sometimes representations of communities as being passive or not being active. And that's why I really appreciate the examples that you all gave today around the Big Island community speaking out about how they may have been represented or targeted about those experiences, how the Being Micronesian hashtag, you know, impacts, helps people understand and grow more aware of that. And the work at We're Oceania, you know, is right on with just directly serving our communities and our neighbors here. So I guess there's that sense of what is the action? I think about Jojo, because he's the example that I have of, he started a community. I think about COFA, about how we started a community and welcomed so many people into it. In the meetings, half of them were at Zippies, right? Very grounded, very real, inviting people to come and talk story and listen and strategize and plan. Who should we talk to next? Where should we wave our signs? Sometimes we have to step out of comfort zones and be, like Josie was saying, more assertive, or trying to call that part forth in order to serve others. So I guess my sort of question maybe to the three of you is there something that you might direct us to, because we have a nice audience today, that you would suggest we could do to support awareness on these issues? I mean, one of the things that wasn't mentioned today that I've grown aware of is the presence of our COFA migrants working in the meatpacking industry and the huge impacts that, you know, they're feeling in terms of the COVID-19 disease spread and loss of work and all of it. You know, we teach students, but it's the end of the semester, and I just would welcome, and maybe others would too, kind of if you have any concrete or ideas on ways we can support. So I have to call on somebody. I'll let you.
Thanks, Julie. Let's see, I'll call. Kathy.
So you're just asking questions about, hi Julie, by the way. Really appreciate your comments. And so you're asking just about how do we support, what kind of support do our communities need, basically? Any direct support?
Yeah, or is there somewhere you could point us to, is there info that you think we can help share or jump on board? Is there an agency, a group, Jojikum, you know, or, yeah.
Well, I'll definitely, of course, say that Jojikum will always appreciate support. We have a website, jojikum.org, jojikum.org. And you know, that's where if you would like to sign up to support our climate change efforts, but we're also actually doing, I forgot to mention, but our organization also did some small scale awareness and outreach with through social media with our youth. And we're working on an outreach video too for COVID awareness out here. Even though we have no cases, we're trying to prepare the community to take it as seriously as possible. Beyond that though, I know that the Marshall Islands Consulate could always use more support in their outreach and in their efforts. I think that they're totally, they're doing so much important work, and they definitely could use the support. And Tamara Heine is actually on the call. Wow, that's so great. Tamara Heine is actually a representative from the consulate. And so she would be great to reach out to. And then I'm not sure who directly to speak with for the Big Island Association, but I know that they are out there, and if anybody has communication links, they would be great. And then Dr. Sheldon Brigelung is on this call as well, and Dr. Wilfred Adik are the doctors, the Marshallese doctors in our community who've been doing a lot of important work as well. Tamara Heine has said in a chat group that the Marshall Islands Consulate has a Facebook group, Facebook page that you can follow to get awareness and also to share their updates.
Mahalo. Josie?
Yeah, I'll share from our end. Of course, here on the ground, every day we receive calls about family needing food. So food is one of our main thing that family needs, and sometimes we get calls for diapers for babies. And seeing that a lot of people, or seeing that the shutdown has been extended for another more month, and the one topic that I'm going to go into is unemployment hasn't been as quick as people need it. We are expecting more people to be needing, household stuff, things, especially like babies, maybe formulas. And fortunately for food, there's a lot of resources out there. Another thing that we provide here is resources in the language. So when we get resources from people that are just in English, we try our best to put it into the language and put it out. Most of the participants we service, they don't speak good English and they cannot read good English. So that's really, really important. And this has also pushed us to work collaboratively with all the other community organizations, and even the Department of Health, Department of DHS, all the different departments, to be able to get all the information in the different languages. Finally, this one brings me close to Jojo during this time. And, every time there's a problem, you always wonder, or if there's like a good news, like stimulus check or unemployment. Actually, unemployment, I didn't expect that we were going to have too much hardship with it. I thought the stimulus check was something that I would worry about. But every time there's this benefit, I'm always worried, because somehow, somewhere, there is some block for COFA citizen. And that has been the work that Jojo has been doing for his whole life. He died fighting for adequate health care for Micronesians or COFA citizens in Hawaii. And so one of the problem, and one of the things we've been working closely with other, oh gosh, I'm like getting emotional here, but other agencies and folks and colleagues out there, like Dina, I see Dina here, Tamara, there's so many of you who are on this call, Phileas, working on understanding the unemployment problem. And I can speak from my own personal experience and from the people we have helped here until today. From our work at We Are Oceania and my own personal experience, we have not seen any COFA citizen that got approved for unemployment. So unemployment is not a benefit, it's not a public charge. We all know that. Unemployment is a earned benefit. You work, you are eligible. So aside from the system being high volume now is high traffic all the times, we suspect or observe unusual, outcome for a COFA citizen. For example, I know I wish Tamara can share her experience, but there was someone who got approved, and then they request for verification of her I-94 and passport, and then right after that, she got turned down. We got many people who come in to ask for us to translate their letters of denial based on income that was from 2019. And so at first I thought, oh, maybe they fill out the form wrong. But then when I did it on my own and I got the family member denied, and I went, wait a minute, something is wrong. So even during this time of, how would I say, disaster and crisis and everyone needs help, it's just sad to see another, you know, barrier for us. Here at WOW, just for everyone's information, we help people to fill out their unemployment. We also help people to fill out or to enroll in any healthcare. If they lost their job and they were covered under their job, they will be qualified for the Obamacare. If they're disabled, their children, they're pregnant, they will be qualified for MedQuest, and we can help both. So please let your network know that we also provide those help during this time. Thank you.
Mahalo, mahalo, Josie. It is a hard time, and especially thinking of those struggles in light of the legacy of Jojo. But it's also, his legacy is also one I think that helps to inspire us in really important ways. And I want to start to bring this together to a close. There's so much more we could continue to go on saying. And needs to be said, which is one of the reasons we set up the Laulima site as a place to continue the dialogue and the conversation. So if you don't have access, you can contact Ruben Campos, our graduate assistant, will be able to add you to the site. And we want to create those resources and connections that will help all of us get through this together. I think with that, I might just ask Ula, the other main organizer, to kind of say a few kind of closing words before we wrap up here. Ula, could you share a little bit?
Without preparation. I just want to thank all of you. It's so amazing to see everybody on this call. People that I worked with for a long time and people that I heard about but never really worked. I think if we really put our energies together, we can do what Jojo would want us to do. And that is, okay, we share the knowledge, but then we also take action on it. I don't know how many times he's been pushing us to do that. And I'm sure a lot of you not on that one. Very energetic. And yeah. I think he's with us in spirit. I think he's sharing all the energy he can with us so we can continue to do the right things. Thank you everybody for being so gracious and patient with this process of setting this thing up, and a big mahalo to Tai that pulled it together, and to Ruben that made it actually technically happen, among other things. So thank you everybody. Speakers, you were asked for a reason. We very much admire your work. So please continue. Use all the beautiful links. Get to know more about everybody's work, and mahalo.
Mahalo. For those of you who aren't following the chat, you might go in there because there's a lot of really good links and comments in there. And as was shared, there are so many really knowledgeable voices and engaged folks here that we really could go on and on for a number of other hours. But for now, we'll consider this the beginning of a conversation that we'll want to continue when we move forward together. So with that, please join me in giving a huge mahalo to Kathy, Josie, Sha, for all of your wonderful contributions. Yay. Mahalo, mahalo, mahalo. And we will post this up, and I'll send out the link for where this gets posted. So you guys can all take it. Thanks. Sorry, that echoing was weird. No. So yeah, we'll post this up for everyone to see the video, and also offer those other links for Laulima afterwards. Mahalo nui again, and have a great day, evening. Oh, I'm not sure what time zone you're in, but stay in touch, be well, and aloha nui.